The inhabitants in this archipelago of Southeast Asia during the pre-colonial era had effectively synthesizing and transmitting cultures according to their personal and communal experiences. Malayan, Indian, Arab, Chinese, and other influences were properly dealt by early people in this archipelago. Their constant encounter with these migrants and traders made them able to develop a culture that was appropriate and consistent with their condition in this part of Asia, in the process of free cultural dialogues and eventually into a distinct Filipino cultures. Therefore, before the coming of the imperial Spain, Filipinos had already developed a distinct culture that embodies their ideals or values connected with their sphere of living. These cultural principles thenceforth were transmitted and can be observed in the practices of the people in different spheres of the society. Likewise, Filipino spirituality was already formed and has taken root consistent with the principles and values of the early Filipinos. However, Filipino spirituality and other practices were disrupted in the coming of colonial powers in the archipelago, eventually named as Philippines by the Spaniards. The encounter of Filipino culture with the dominant Christian culture of the Spaniards had corrupted, if not stopped, the free modification process of the former. The instituted belief system of the Filipinos was demolished and labeled as demonic practices. This discriminative practice by the Spanish friars had gradually, if not immediately, corrupted the mind of the Filipinos. Even worse was the coming of the American colonizers, accompanied with several Christian traditions like the Methodist, the Baptist, the Presbyterian, and many more. Today, it is common among Filipinos to deny the cultures transmitted by early Filipinos to the generation of today. Cultures of the dominating races in the world are flourishing in this part of the world. Colonial mentality is the emerging culture. Young Filipinos easily forgetting the cultures that the early Filipinos did treasure, believing that it carries the value system that every Filipino must live in. These Filipino cultures were even easily left behind due to colonial powers who attributed Filipino cultures inferior and demonic. One of the Filipino cultural practices that suffers from this is the ritual of Atang. There were many emerging criticisms about this practice coming from the Christian religious groups that led into reduction, if not totally renunciation, of its practitioners. Although this practice is very popular among Ilocano people, it is more than gradually abandoned due to negative attitudes of those Christianized Filipinos. On the other hand, Atang is still practiced by those people who believe that Atang is a cultural practice that needs to be preserved, especially when understood its values that it teaches. In spite the realities that many people were abandoning the culture of the Filipinos, there were still Filipinos who espoused the preservation of ancient Filipino practices like the ritual of Atang. This ritual was believed to be an important practice that embodies many Filipino values in which describe the identity of being a Filipino.